Hello, I'm Whitney Belker with Miami's Global Connection. Our show is designed to raise public awareness of the interdependent world in which we live. We focus on local leaders who are involved in diverse international issues and projects. Polls indicate that Americans are not well informed about international activities, many of which are occurring within our own local communities. The goal of our program is to change that. The sponsor of our show is the Greater Miami chapter of the United Nations Association of the United States, otherwise known as the UNA. The UNA is a grassroots organization that is devoted to informing and educating the public about critical services provided by the UN, while serving to make the UN more effective. It's a big job. Today our guest is Dr. Allan Rosenbaum, whose distinguished career and commitment to international development initiatives has afforded him the opportunity to work in more than 60 countries around the world. For the past 7 years, Dr. Rosenbaum has served as Professor of Public Administration and Director of the Institute for Public Management and Community Services. Dr. Rosenbaum received his BA in History from the University of Miami, a master's degree in Higher Education Administration from Southern Illinois University, and a master's degree in Political Science and Public Administration from the University of California, Berkeley. And my goodness, he's got a PhD in Political Science. What haven't you done?
Well,
welcome, Dr. Rosenbaum.
It's a pleasure to be here, Whitney. Thank you for inviting me.
So, considering all of these degrees and masters and PhDs related to international affairs, what got you interested in working in the international arena?
Well, actually, it is an interesting story in a sense, in that most of my career I really was concerned principally with American government and American public policy. Like many folks in universities, I've been at different universities and I've been in and out of government. 14 years ago I came back here to Miami, which is my home, to be Dean of the School of Public Affairs and Services at Florida International University. And I did that for 7 years and then was returning to the faculty and thought to myself, is there anything new that I could think of to say about American government and politics? And concluded there wasn't, and decided I would switch professional careers in a sense and move into international development work, international democratization. And about that time, the U.S. government was initiating a very large project to strengthen legislative bodies in Latin America on the assumption that they were very crucial to building democratic institutions. And because I had had some experience working with the U.S. Congress during the Carter administration, I was asked to take the leadership of this project, which involves strengthening national legislative bodies in about 8 or 9 different Latin American countries.
But you've also had you've worked a lot in Latin America, but I understand you've also had the opportunity to work in Europe, in Asia, and Africa as well.
Yeah, that's been a really very special experience and very special opportunity. The first formal work that I did in terms of helping work with countries making the transition to democracy was in Latin America. But in the past 4 or 5 years, I've wound up working with the parliament in Ukraine and working on decentralizing health services and working with civil service reform in Poland and working some lecturing on decentralization and local governance in China and working with executive legislative relations in some of the African countries.
And what has been your greatest challenge in dealing with, it's very different working within your own country. In the United States, where we have over 200 years of government experience, we have over 200 years of having these infrastructures in place. When you go to start these projects, let's pick an example, perhaps in say, Latin America, what would you say is the biggest challenge when you first start out?
Well, there are a couple of different challenges. One is building relationships with the people with whom you're working. I mean, that's really absolutely critical if you're going to be successful, and that often takes a good bit of time and effort. Another difficulty, another major challenge, is frankly in dealing with the U.S. government and making the U.S. government, and not just the U.S. government. I've worked with the OAS, with the Swedish International Development Agency, a number of other organizations. And there is in part because foreign assistance activities and working in other countries is often seen as politically controversial, and that there isn't often the kind of support for these activities that there might be.
Yeah,
there's a real pressure to build quick results and to get quick results, and it's hard sometimes to get the people who are sponsoring the projects, in this, whether it's the U.S. government or whoever, to recognize it's going to take some time to build these institutions.
In many cases, you work with a lot of the multilateral organizations. The United Nations is one of them. In addition, you mentioned the OAS. I believe you've also worked with the Inter-American Development Bank and the World Bank.
And the Asian Development Bank as well.
And what do you think the role of these multilateral organizations are in terms of furthering your work?
Well, their role is a very, very important one. I mean, when you realize, for example, that in Latin America, USAID invests maybe $700 million a year, and the Inter-American Development Bank loans $7 billion a year, you can understand why a Latin American president might just as soon have lunch with the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, Enrique Iglesias, as with the president of the United States. The amount of money that goes into these countries through the multilateral development banks in particular is very, very significant.
Great. Well, we understand that there's a lot of controversy regarding the role of these multilateral organizations, and perhaps we can talk about that in more depth when we return after our break. Thank you.
Sure.
Songbirds we enjoy each summer, winter in the rainforests. Right now, many are losing their homes. The Arbor Day Foundation's Rainforest Rescue is making a difference. Go to arborday.org, see how to support rainforest rescue, and find out which trees to plant where you live, so our songbirds have a home in the summer and the winter too. Go to arborday.org now.
Over here! Did you know that the first person to fly faster than the speed of sound was Chuck Yeager back in 1947? No? I didn't think so.
It's fun to know history. Find curious facts from America's past at loc.gov, the Library of Congress website.
Hi, and welcome back to Miami's Global Connection. I'm Whitney Belker, and today we're talking with Dr. Allan Rosenbaum, the director of the Institute of Public Management and Community Service at Florida International University. Earlier we were talking about his role of helping build democracies and the infrastructure for many, many countries around the world. And Dr. Rosenbaum, we'd like to continue. And perhaps you can tell us an example of some of the changes that you've seen during your career. I know you've been doing this work for quite a long time.
Well, yeah, there's, obviously when you're dealing with something like trying to help a country strengthen its democratic institutions, sometimes things move very slowly, and sometimes you take 2 or 3 steps back for every couple of steps forward. But certainly there are some instances I can point to. One of the first projects that I was ever involved in, as I was mentioning before, was working with national legislators